A good Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Lots and lots to cover in the weather department. And first and foremost, we do have a weather impact alert that is going to go for once again the third straight weekend with some form of winter weather potential. But we do have two phases of this weather impact alert. So obviously we're talking about last week's. We had three different phases we were covering. The second phase of this one is going to be a frigid cold snap, and that forecast goes for everyone here. We're talking northernmost counties, southernmost counties, eastern, western. Everyone in central Georgia is going to feel a very, very cold spell, maybe even colder than what we did have as of Monday and Tuesday mornings, dare I even say. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going to be in store for your headlines. Let's get the clicker going. I believe this graphic just has to play through to the end of the duration. There we go. Chilly but not horrible to wrap up the work week. Then we have that big chill coming in as we go into the weekend, really starting as soon as maybe Saturday morning is what I'm seeing as of right now. And your chances for some snow showers. They are increasing, but only for a select few areas of central Georgia. We're not talking about a widespread accumulation like we did have as of last year's event, but we will go over which areas have the greatest potential for seeing some of those snow showers. Here's a look around the quad. Plenty of cloud coverage, higher up in the sky. So it may be blocking a bit of your sunshine here as we approach the midday hour. Overall, it's a story of the temperatures, which are relatively pleasant. 41 still feels like 36 degrees right now down at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, but the breeze is looking to subside as we go throughout today. So across the eastern United States, everyone for the most part is still rather chilly. 10 degrees in Indianapolis, 19 in Lexington, making our way down to some 40s and some 50s down here in the southeast corner of the United States. Upper 30s in northern Georgia, transitioning into those low and mid 40s down in central Georgia, and then we get into southern Georgia, holding on to some numbers, even some flashes of green, so 51 and 52 in areas like Brunswick and down in Valdosta. Temperature-wise here in central Georgia specifically, 40 at the lowest it does appear, and then we transition into those mid-40s farther down to the south and the southeast. Very similar temperature trend that we did see when we saw the state as a whole. So the winds, we do have some sustained winds up to 5, 6, maybe 7 miles per hour. However, that's not going to really be much of a factor today, especially once we warm up above the 50-degree mark, which we are forecasted to do for yet another day. But right now, some of those areas holding on to the breezy conditions are still feeling like the upper 30s. So it feels like 37 in Roberta, 37 in Monticello, all the way into the low 40s across elsewhere here in central Georgia. So here's a look at your satellite and radar, which does look rather gloomy, but take a look at how thin this gray shade is. This is indicating that higher level cirrus clouds that are continuing to push in from the west and over towards the east. We'll start to see some brighter white shades over to the west, and that's going to be some denser cloud cover in nature. So while we did get a picture perfect start to your Thursday morning, not necessarily going to be how we wrap it up. And once again, forgot to throw the cloud cover on here under satellite and radar, but once again, it's a very uneventful day. We're not looking at anything in the way of rain chances, so that's not the biggest deal in the world. 29 for a low temperature yesterday, up to 53 for a high temperature. So both those numbers are actually both exactly 7 degrees below your average high and your average low. Record high 79 back in 1944, and your record low 10 degrees back in 1986. Kind of zooming through all these current conditions because we have a lot to talk about when it comes to future view coming up in just a moment. But the breeze finally subsides, so 51 going to finally feel true to its actual value, which you will see here on your wind chills graphic. I guess I should step out of the way of those numbers in the afternoon. 51 and 52 for those feels like temperatures, 3, 4 into 5 o'clock. Then the numbers begin to dip down as we go overnight. We're expecting some clearing in the cloud cover, so I do imagine it'll feel like somewhere in the mid to the upper 20s as we walk out the door again tomorrow. But like I mentioned, those numbers are going to get even colder as we go into the future. So I took your recommendation that many of you have said on Facebook first and foremost. We do have a legend now depicting the type of precipitation that you are going to see here on Future View. If you see some purple colors, that's going to indicate sleet showers, more of a mix between rain and snow, so kind of that freezing rain that we were talking about last week. That's going to be more so in your pink colors. Then you have rain, which has a drastic gradient of greens into yellows, reds, and oranges. And as you get into those reds and oranges, maybe even some flashes of some pink with some rain showers. That's going to indicate some heavier rainfall rates. But for the most part, when you do see something in the way of a purple or a pink, it's mainly going to be of the frozen variety this time of year. So snow showers, light snow showers are going to be indicated by a white color. But as you go farther and farther over to the right of that scale, it is going to indicate some purple and maybe even some blue, which is heavier and heavier snowfall rates, which you will get a glimpse of in just a moment. So like I mentioned, for your short-term forecast, we do have the passing cloud cover. That wraps up your Thursday afternoon on a bit of a gloomy note. That takes us into Friday, where we do have some clouds in the forecast, but we should have plenty of good images of that sunrise tomorrow morning. Going into lunchtime, that's the earliest window that we could start to see a couple of light showers pop up. Now, the rain chances aren't looking as impressive as they were maybe around this time yesterday or yesterday afternoon. I would plan on about a 20% chance of seeing a light shower throughout Friday afternoon and lingering into the evening hours, and that will be enveloped within some of this cloud cover that is going to push through. It's not going to put a damper on any of your plans, so I think outdoor plans that you have for your Friday afternoon and evening, they can go on without a hitch, and we will continue to go into the nighttime hours and try to see some cloud cover clear, but then we are going to turn our eyes to the north as we go into early on Saturday morning. Not seeing anything as of the midnight hour as of right now, but here come those purple and those blue and those white colors. So not only is this indicating some snowfall, there is nothing in the way of either of these mix categories. There is no sleet. There is no wintry mix that we have been referring to. So nothing in the way of possible ice, freezing rain, or anything in the way of rain. We are very confident that whatever we see in the way of precipitation throughout your Saturday is going to be of the snow variety, and we'll talk about why that is in just a moment. But let's go ahead and talk about the timing. Moving in as early as maybe 7 to 8, possibly even 9 a.m. on Saturday in our northernmost counties, but you are going to see a trend with this, and the heavier or the darker shades of these colors are going to be over here to the east and the northeast. That is where we continue to have the most confidence in something in the way of some steady snow showers that could actually lead to some accumulation. These areas in northeast central Georgia, if you kind of think about it, dividing it into thirds. So we have an area to the west of I-75 right here, the area between I-16 and I-75 down to the south, and then up here to the north of I-16 and to the east of I-75. This northeasternmost third, that's the area that I want you to turn your attention to. These areas have the best chance of seeing something in the way of snow, in the way of snow accumulation. Farther over to the west, farther down to the southwest, that's where we're talking about more so some flurry showers, and that's not going to lead to too much accumulation or too many impacts. So as you can see, these areas over here to the east and the northeast, they hold on to these snow showers well into the afternoon. So while you may see some showers as far west as areas like Macon, over into Warner Robins, maybe a couple of flurries, that's mainly going to be in the morning time frame. I expect these chances in terms of snow to taper off from west over to east. So if you live over to the east and the northeast, you're going to hold on to those snow showers well into the afternoon, maybe even into the evening time frame, but it's still not quite as widespread as what you see way back over here to Charleston, Columbia, all areas of South Carolina, and getting up into eastern North Carolina, because those areas are going to be closer to the center of low pressure that is way off in the Atlantic Ocean. We are on the outermost edge of this cluster of moisture. So that's why areas over here to the west of central Georgia, there remains a lot of uncertainty about what you will see in the way of snowfall, if anything at all, because the slightest little wiggle and wobble with this low pressure system could result in maybe no snow chances if it wiggles over to the east, or if it pushes over to the west a little bit more, it would result in more widespread snowfall for all of central Georgia. So that's what we're continuing to try to emphasize. There are going to be changes, and the slightest little change can make all the difference with our forecast. But I want to turn your attention to the second phase of this weather impact alert, which will start to kick off as we go into the nighttime hours on Saturday into early on Sunday. Obviously, you don't see anything. The cloud cover is clearing and the snow showers are clearing off to the east, but that's just exactly it. The clearing in the cloud cover will allow for a drop in the temperatures, and along with that, we have some gusty winds in the forecast as we go into Sunday morning. We'll talk about what those feels like temperatures are looking like. As we go into Sunday morning, I'll go ahead and give you a bit of a tease. They are not looking very friendly whatsoever. So now let's take the same future view zoom in a little bit and start to talk about the specific temperatures that we see. So 5 a.m. on Saturday, this is going to be just a few hours before the onset of that possible snow. Temperatures right around freezing temperature, maybe a little bit above, maybe even close to the 40-degree mark down to the south and the southeast. Now, a lot of your weather apps and maybe even just general or weather apps, I guess you should say, and even our graphics, you're going to see a high temperature somewhere in the mid to the upper 30s at the very least. Some areas are even forecasting some highs into the lower or even the mid 40s as we go into Saturday. That high temperature does not necessarily mean that is going to be the temperature into the afternoon time frame. So you can see this time frame early in the morning on Saturday. That's looking likely to be when we hit our high temperature, because as that snow creeps down from north to south, what is it going to do? It is going to pull a bunch of colder air that is higher up in the atmosphere down to the surface, and that is going to result in a cool down with your temperatures as the snow continues to fall in the morning hours on Saturday. So it's kind of the exact opposite that we would see on a crystal clear day. Once you get some sunshine in the forecast, like today, like yesterday, you begin to see a warming trend with your temperatures. Well, once we get into that 8 to 9 a.m. time frame, we're actually looking at these numbers to continue to drop here in central Georgia. So obviously, don't get caught up in a specific location seeing maybe something of the snow variety, maybe Wrightsville. Okay, it's 1 degree above freezing, but there's steady snow showers. Obviously, all of these temperature plots are not going to be exactly what this town is sitting at as we get into this specific time in the future. Just know that there is a general dropping trend with your numbers back below freezing temperature, very likely into the mid and the upper 20s as the snow does continue to fall. And as you can see, we go to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, temperatures down in the mid and the upper 20s still, mainly up to the north and the northeast. Areas a little bit farther down to the south, a little bit too warm for anything in the way of some wintry weather. And then eventually we do get into the nighttime hours. We lose any bit of sunshine that is very likely not going to be visible throughout the day on Saturday. This is looking like a mostly cloudy environment. But we go into 7 p.m. Numbers down even a little bit more, somewhere in the low 20s, the mid 20s. This is obviously a very cold environment and definitely well cold enough to produce something in the way of some steady snowfall showers. And as the cloud cover clears, we drop the actual temperatures down into the upper teens, especially farther up to the north and the northwest. And this is still a couple hours before we're forecasted to hit our actual low temperatures sometime around 7 to 8 a.m. on Sunday. However, we are going to have some very gusty winds, so I imagine these temperatures very likely won't drop down more than the upper teens like they are forecasted to. So in terms of how much snow are we forecasting, don't get caught up in the totals that you do see on this map. I am not forecasting almost 5 inches of snow up in Sparta. Is it a possibility? Yes, but I'm not putting too much stock into it. Our general thinking right now is the highest totals that we will see will be up here to the north and the northeast, where you can see some of these kind of lighter gray, bluish gray colors. As you go down to the west and the southwest, there is a very fine cutoff. You have about a 1 inch mark of snow right here in Irwinton, say according to this model run, and the totals do get substantially higher up to the east and the northeast. So that's what I want you to focus on, number one, the northeastern corner of central Georgia. That's where you do have the best likelihood of seeing some accumulations up to 1 inch, 2, maybe even 3. Not necessarily buying anything over 3 inches right now. Our general guidance has 2 as the max, so I'm kind of electing to go with the middle ground with 3 at the highest up there. But as you go down towards areas like Macon, Warner Robins, Cochran, areas along I-16 getting to the I-75 corridor, you do see some accumulations, even Macon pretty close to the 1 inch mark in terms of the accumulation. I'm not necessarily buying that Macon will see about 1 inch of snow. We very well could, but those totals are going to drastically decrease as you go to the west, as you go down to the southwest, even some areas that are left completely out of the fun here in central Georgia. So it's really these areas that are popping up some totals about 1 inch or above. That's where we have the most confidence in some snow falling and some snow sticking. It's more so going to be a story of just some scattered flurries over to the west and the southwest, and not as many implications in terms of some hazardous conditions on the roads, and of course maybe some slick spots that could accumulate on sidewalks and some things that could eventually freeze over as we go into the end of the weekend, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. Winter weather alerts. So we have 3 categories to look out for: a winter storm watch, a winter weather advisory, which is an upgrade from that watch that is issued. And then an upgrade from that is a winter storm warning. So what we have as of right now is the earliest alert that we can get. That is going to be your winter storm watch issued for Hancock and Washington counties. Now, this isn't set in stone. I imagine that we will have many other areas in central Georgia included in this winter storm watch or the advisory, maybe even winter storm warning by the time we get there. What we are showing right now is where the area or where the National Weather Service has the most confidence in potential impacts of this winter weather and potential snow, and that is going to be, once again, northeast central Georgia. So Sparta, Sandersville, getting on up into the I-20 corridor all the way over towards Augusta. Those areas in that winter storm watch, we're forecasting the potential for maybe 2 inches of snow accumulation. That remains possible as of right now. And we are forecasting the possibility of some gusts up to 35 miles per hour with your winds. So obviously this is going to be a very cold system, and we're definitely going to have cold enough temperatures to produce some snow totals, maybe up to 2 inches. You pair up those well below freezing temperatures with some 35 mile per hour gusts, it is going to be a frigid afternoon here in central Georgia. But you can see that there is not a lot of confidence across the rest of central Georgia receiving anything in the way of some snow accumulation or just some general snow showers. Right now, I do believe that this will expand. I believe we'll get areas like Baldwin County, Putnam County, maybe Wilkinson and Johnson counties within a winter storm watch. But I'm not too confident in it expanding all the way over to areas like Macon, all the way over to Warner Robins, down below I-16, maybe down into Cochran. Of course, we will update you with the latest updates as we get them. But right now, just know, once again, northeast central Georgia, we are not forecasting snowfall totals up to 2 inches in Macon and Roberta and Perry and Warner Robins and Unadilla. That is going to be a big question mark. A lot of you are going to see these graphics and think they mean these impacts are for all of central Georgia. No, they are just for the northeastern corner of central Georgia right now, very likely to be expanded into our surrounding counties by this highlighted light blue color. So here's a rough drawing as of this morning. All the data that we've looked at, I went ahead and kind of drew some shades about what you should expect. These areas in this darker blue shade indicating that snow is likely, and along with snow being likely, snow accumulations are also looking likely. But then as you get closer and closer to I-16, I-75, the Macon area, that's where we start to see this shade of flurries possible. That's going to lead to a light accumulation at the most. We're talking about less snow than we did see as of 2 weeks ago, and you can see well down to the south and the southwest, completely even left out of the possibility of flurries. Right now, those areas on the edge, you shouldn't be concerned about anything. But if you are looking at the possibility of flurries, you're not really looking at anything in the way of impacts on the roads. Of course, always better to be safe than sorry. Take it a little bit slower, drive with some caution throughout your Saturday, maybe even into Sunday. But right now, we're not looking at really drastic impacts besides, once again, this northeastern third of central Georgia. So to the east of I-75 and to the north of I-16. Those are going to be the areas that I really want to highlight. And we will probably edit some of these shaded areas over the course of the next couple of days. This is a rough estimate, and that's why I put the label on here as of Thursday morning, and this is going to be throughout your Saturday. Maybe we are going to see that low pressure center trek a little bit closer to central Georgia. That would expand the snow likely category farther over to the west and the southwest, but only time will tell. But speaking of that low pressure center, the path is going to really matter in this situation. What we have been talking about, there's really one of 2 scenarios. Will this low pressure system go kind of cross over maybe the portion of northern Florida, maybe even down into southern Georgia, and kind of hug the southeastern corner of the United States? Or is it going to cross over central Florida, and is it going to go out into the Atlantic Ocean a little bit more? Right now, situation 1, so scenario 1 is really looking like the most probable, and that is going to bring the chance of some snow showers in east and northeast central Georgia. That's what we've continued to see. And number 2, that would result in no snow whatsoever. There is the possibility of still a little bit of fluctuation in between these 2 scenarios, but right now the general confidence is scenario 1 is going to play out. But along with that, you take a look at this icon and you see this counterclockwise rotation. Counterclockwise just means backwards of when a clock normally does spin. So basically, we have a bunch of cold air up in the north and northeastern United States. As this low pressure system rides up the Atlantic coast, what it's going to do is that counterclockwise rotation, kind of follow my hands, it's going to grab that cold air at the top of the clock and it's going to pull it all the way down here into the deep south of the United States. So that's where we're getting that very, very cold air from, and that's going to be on the backside of this low pressure center. So that's going to be over to the west of it, over to the east of it, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's going to be a very large cluster of some rain, but areas on the east United States coast, that's where we are looking at. We are looking at this cold air to interact with a lot of moisture around the center of this low pressure, and that cold air will continue to get pushed down from north to south, courtesy of the circulation of this low pressure system. So here are your main takeaways as of this morning. A whole lot changed over the last 24 hours, and that is why we always tell you to stay up to date with the latest forecast. We will iterate it, we will reiterate it, and we will continue to reiterate it even as we get closer. Yes, we're 3 days out, but things can and will still change. We want you to stay up to date with the latest forecast in order to be properly informed about what's going to happen. So over the last 24 hours, we have seen snow go from very unlikely to increase to a good deal of confidence, at least that some areas of central Georgia are going to see something in the way of some snow showers. Totals up to 2 inches are looking possible to the east and the northeast. The closer you get to the interstates, the closer you get to I-16, the closer you get to I-75, we're looking at closer to about a ½ inch of accumulation, which once again is not going to last on the ground very long, not going to really pose any travel impacts whatsoever. It's really northeast central Georgia that we still want to keep our eyes peeled out for, to where 2 inches of snow accumulation going to take longer in order of melting, and we'll talk about why that might take a couple of days maybe to even melt, because we are forecasting a very big cool down after these snow showers move in as we go into Saturday. So high confidence now in the location of where those impacts are going to be. Once again, northeast central Georgia. I will continue to say it to hammer that point in. I am not talking about areas over to the west of I-75. I'm not talking about areas to the south of I-16. Northeast central Georgia, around the Milledgeville area, Hancock County, Washington County, those areas are looking like they will have the highest potential impacts. And we have high confidence in the precipitation type. Like I just showed you, those temperatures are going to cool down as that snow does move in. That very, very cold air is going to result in snow showers. No wintry mix, no sleet, nothing in the way of rain. It is going to be snow if we see anything in the way of precipitation on Saturday. What we do still have low confidence in are these specific amounts. So we are really trying to fine tune how much of an accumulation we are going to see. I know I have totals up to 2 inches, maybe closer to around a ½ inch of accumulation outlined here. These are rough guesses as of right now. I just showed you future view, which showed Hancock County and Sparta might get close to 5 inches of snow. So there's still a good amount of disagreement. We are going to try to fine tune that specific snowfall totals map as we get closer and closer. I would expect that really over the next day or so. Once we get closer to Saturday, probably sometime throughout tomorrow, we will fine tune that official snowfall totals forecast. So over the next 3 days, tolerable and kind of temperate weather, at least you could say, for the winter time. I continue to say that, but it is going to be cold. You just don't need as many layers as you go into each and every afternoon, but the overnight hours are going to dip back below freezing temperature. And once again, 36, a bit misleading. That's not going to be an afternoon high temperature on Saturday. That's going to be a high temperature that we hit earlier in the morning. Those numbers are going to cool down as we go throughout the day on Saturday, courtesy of that snow bringing down that much colder air from higher levels of the atmosphere. But you may notice it's still only about a 30% chance. And yes, this is because I do expect a good amount of wiggle. Future View just showed a good coverage of seeing some snow, which is probably more reminiscent of about a 60 to maybe even a 70% chance of seeing some snow showers. But I do expect maybe that to recede back up to the northeast just a little bit. There is going to be a lot of fluctuation. 30% is kind of covering the bases in terms of not too confident that all these areas of central Georgia are going to see anything, but I do imagine we might give a bit of the uptick if we continue to see some good model agreement with the next couple of model runs with Future View. But your weather impact alert will start as we turn the clock over to midnight on Saturday. Early morning on Saturday is when we are forecasting some of those snow showers to move in closer to around 7 to 8 a.m. But now let's talk about the winds, because I mentioned that they are going to be present Saturday into Sunday morning. So nothing really in the way of breezy conditions throughout today or tomorrow, but you can start to see some colors of blue and yellow build back into the forecast as we go into Friday afternoon. Then we go into Saturday morning. A bit of a light breeze, some occasional gusts up to 20 miles per hour. And then take a look at Saturday afternoon. 5 p.m. Some gusts that are close to 40 miles per hour. Some widespread shades of pink and some red that you can see in southwest Georgia. So even though you won't necessarily be dealing with anything in the way of wintry weather closer to the Albany and Cordele areas, you are going to be dealing with some gustier winds than areas up in northeast central Georgia. So obviously this is going to be something that would very likely warrant a wind advisory throughout the day on Saturday. And the breeze goes down a little bit into Sunday morning, but we're still talking about gusts 20 to 25 miles per hour. That is going to result in a much colder feels like temperature than what the values are going to sit at. And remember, I showed you those values. They already get down into the upper teens. We are very likely looking at some single digit feels like temperatures. But let's take a look at this graphic because it can give us a rough estimate this far out as of right now. Good mix of some upper 40s and some low 50s for feels like temperatures this afternoon. Going into Friday morning, 32 degrees for feels like temperatures, maybe a little bit colder in the upper 20s. And then we go into Friday afternoon. Once again, fairly temperate. We do see the return of that green color. And remember, green is always going to be good on this graphic, especially during these cold spells. We'll go ahead and say goodbye to the green as we go into Saturday. Feels like numbers are already down somewhere in the 20s, maybe even into the low 30s if you do have some slightly warmer numbers, but they drop throughout the day. Saturday afternoon, feels like numbers are in the mid-teens here in central Georgia in light of those very gusty winds, maybe even up to 35 or 40 miles per hour, combined with temperatures that are dropping throughout the day into the 20s. And those numbers continue to get even colder as we go, not even into the coldest portion of Sunday morning just yet. Take a look at that. Atlanta has a -1 wind chill value at 3 a.m. on Sunday. Obviously, none of you are going to be out and about at 3 a.m., but this is a good estimate about what the numbers will be, say around Sunday morning at 7 or 8 a.m. when many of you may have some plans to go out to church service. 4 degrees for it feels like temperature in Macon, 7 in Dublin. Not only are we looking at our fair share of single digit feels like temperatures, we're well down in the single digits, and I imagine the farther north that you are, we could very well see some feels like numbers that are close to 0 degrees, maybe even as far down as the negative values like Atlanta right there. We'll keep our fingers crossed that isn't the scenario, but this is now looking to take the claim for the coldest air mass of the winter season so far. Just 5 days after, we did see a very cold one filter in as of Monday and Tuesday. So this is going to be a big reason why we continue our weather impact alert into Sunday morning and as we get into Monday morning for Groundhog Day. This is how many hours we are forecasting below freezing this weekend into the beginning of next week. Some areas closer to the metro Atlanta area and North Georgia are going to have roughly 60 to 70 hours over the course of this weekend into next Monday that they will be below freezing temperature. Very thankfully, it's not the case in central Georgia, but the farther north that you go, we're seeing sustained periods of about 40 to maybe 45 hours this weekend below 32 degrees. So that means there's not going to be too many hours that we are going to be above that freezing temperature. So anything frozen that does fall is, number one, going to be very likely to stick to the surface in northeast central Georgia. Number two, it's going to be very reluctant to melt in nature because we're not going to have those temperatures above the 32 degree mark. Now, I think some sunshine is going to help with the melting. However, this is something that obviously being below freezing for this extended period of time throughout this weekend is going to be potentially dangerous for things like pets, plants, and pipes. And along with that, this could result in the refreezing of some of those slick road conditions that settle in for areas of central Georgia that do see some potential snow on the ground sticking to the roads. So about 70% of these snow and ice related injuries do occur in automobiles during this time of year. We showed this graphic a lot as of last weekend, and obviously we're not necessarily looking at an ice concern, but say we get some of that snow to melt throughout the day, it's still on the ground as a liquid form. We go back into the overnight and early morning hours, that can refreeze back over. So what you want to do is drive with caution, leave extra space between you and the vehicle in front of you because these slick surfaces can make it very tough in order to stop. And along with that, taking it a little bit slower. If you do start to hydroplane, you start to lose your traction, it's important to remember to coast. Let your foot off the gas, continue to let your car go straight and try to steer it in the direction that you want to go. It's important to not panic in those situations. Just keep your composure, a deep breath, and keep your hands steady on 10 and 2. Then we go into Sunday afternoon. All these precipitation chances move way off to the east and the northeast. and we settle into a pleasant weather stretch, so you may think, for the beginning of next week. Even though it's going to be brutally cold, then our next rainmaker arrives sometime Wednesday, maybe into next Thursday, and we will have some warmer temperatures with this. So this is going to be of the rain variety, whatever we do see, and it's going to result in a slight cool down for next Friday, maybe into next Saturday, but then I see a very quick warming trend back up to the 60s after that. So weather impact alert Saturday all the way into Sunday, all the way into Monday morning for potential snow showers and the frigid cold snap that everyone's going to be dealing with. Stay up to date with the latest forecast. Drive with caution if you have to be out on the roads throughout Saturday and into Sunday morning. And then, of course, protect the 4 Ps: pipes, plants, people, and your pets. It's a good reminder that if it's too cold for you outside, it is also too cold for your furry friends. So that's where things stand. Continue to stay up to date as we get closer, but we'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. otherwise.